Welcome back to the World Trade Webcast. Our guest this week on the World Trade Webcast is Rita Ramalho, manager of the Doing Business Project for the World Bank. Rita, I thought today we could talk about which countries improved the most this year and why.
So this year there were a lot of action and movement and improvement in the sub-Saharan African region. So 5 of the top 10 improvers of this year were from that region. So these are countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, Senegal, for instance, that improved, that all of them did at least reforms in 3 of the areas across the 10 areas measured in doing business, and they improved substantially in those areas. There were also countries in other parts of the region that improves in other parts of the world, that improved substantially. For instance, the United Arab Emirates also had a big improvement in their regulations. Ireland, for instance, is another country that also improved substantially. Trinidad and Tobago, for instance, also. But the continent or the region of sub-Saharan Africa was the area where there was bigger improvements. One of the areas where there were significant improvements was in the process of starting a business. There was a lot of simplification in many African countries, but also in the area of protecting minority investors. So the regulations that make it easier for an individual to actually own a share of a company were made easier in Africa through a new legislation that affected several countries in Africa, and that was a significant improvement for the equity market in the region. Otherwise, there were also a lot of improvements or substantive changes in the area of transferring property. There were 7 countries, I think, out of the top 10 improvers that improved in this area, and also in the aspects of getting credit, either on the credit information aspect, where there were new credit information bureaus set up or expanded, or in the area of also expanding the collateral laws, where there was a lot of action. In terms of which countries went down, there weren't many. Actually, when we look at who improved in the measures that we measure in doing business, we see that 80% of the 189 economies that we cover actually improved. 5% stagnated, so compared to last year are the same, and 15 went down. But even those 15% that went down, they went down by very little. So there's very few countries that systematically decrease. I think when we look at the data over 10 years, there are 2 that stand out as consistently going down over time, which is Venezuela and Zimbabwe. But besides those 2 countries, which are extreme cases, there isn't a consistent deterioration year after year. There's more of a stagnation or improvement. That's what we experience in our data.
Very interesting. And for Venezuela and Zimbabwe, would you attribute that to the political climate in those countries?
I think part of the issue could be the political climate not being the most private sector friendly, and to some extent a lack of interest in these areas of not trying to simplify and not trying to streamline. And to some extent, if you don't try to improve and simplify business regulations, often they just tend to get worse as the implementation becomes more cumbersome, and the volume of transactions would increase over time. And so if you don't actually put more resources in those areas to try to simplify and improve the processes, things would just naturally deteriorate. So I think part of it is lack of attention to these areas more than an effort to make them worse. It's more ignoring their existence to some extent.
Well, that certainly makes sense. And from what you've just told us, certainly the overall improvement is actually astounding here. And again, for anyone interested in seeing the data, not only from this year's report, but in assessing the trend data over the past decade, that information is available on the World Bank's website. Just go to the URL on the screen. And that's all our time today. Please join us again tomorrow as we continue our discussion with Rita about the World Bank's Doing Business 2015 report. For our latest schedule of upcoming episodes, subscribe to us with any of the links below and bookmark this page. All of our previous webcasts can be found right here at thinkglobal.com/webcast. And thanks for watching.